So, without any further ado, a man who needs no introduction, so I won't give you one. Come on up.
Thank you so much. I will, just to begin, I have been meaning to re-sign with Writers Victoria for a long time. When I started being serious about this thing called writing, I actually contacted them. They were in Fitzroy at that time, a long, long time ago, and they took me seriously. They actually gave me advice, and they told me about competitions. I could enter short stories. That was what I was writing at the time, and I'm really appreciative of that generosity, and that a place like this existed. And when I talk to people who are starting writing, this is one of the first places I mention. I'm not going to say this to be mean, but at the same time, I remember I rang up the Media and Entertainment Arts Alliance because I'm a unionist, and I thought I should join them because I wanted to be a writer, and they said, get back to us when you get paid. So I'm just making that comment to say I appreciate that a place like this exists.
Thank you, Christos. And I thought I should let you know that when I did a small pre-interview with Christos, because I don't know Christos, I said, Christos, is there any question that you don't want me to ask or any topic? And he said, I am an open book. I hope you don't regret that. Okay, okay, so let's jump in. And I know you know Christos, I know you know his work, but I'd love just to do a quick snapshot, a little bit like a Tinder profile in some respects. Let's jump in. How old are you?
51.
51, cool. And what suburb did you grow up in?
Well, I grew up in Richmond till I was 13, and then my parents moved us out to Box Hill North at 13, and I stayed there until I was 17.
Okay. And who or what comprises your household?
I live with my partner, Wayne Vanderstelt. We've been living in Preston now for 17 years. It'll be 17 years in February. And he is the love of my life. And there's 2 cats as well.
Wonderful. Okay, and throughout life and you know, the challenges that you've been on, what would you say is a little motto or a little aphorism that's kept you going when things are down?
I mean, that actually changes, Bernadette. I think that there are, it depends on what struggles, what joys, what's happening in your life. Be true, because I'm conscious I'm sitting here as a writer. Be true to that vocation. That's, I mean, I think, well, we can talk about that later in a much more thorough or complex way, but that's I think that's been a constant thing right from the beginning of making a decision that this is what I wanted to do. Be true.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, what books are on your bedside table right now?
Okay, woo. So God, I'm going to sound like such a wanker. But see, okay, so I'm actually. After a long period of not having read him, I've been reading Thus Spoke Zarathustra, the Nietzsche. And I've just finished Norman Mailer's The Castle in the Forest, which was his last book. And I've got the David Marr biography of Patrick White, because my New Year's resolution last year was that I was going to read all of Patrick White, which I've done. And so now I'm reading the biography. That was going to be the last book, you know, in that to do with that resolution. And I'm so glad I've done it. I feel like I've discovered one of the great writers in reading White, and I feel really. I mean, I read him before, but to have not really seriously engaged with that writing, which is, you know, Trev Mann, Solid Mandala, now are 2 of my favourite books of all time. I've also become, and we can talk about this later, because of what I'm working on, I've also got a book about, I can't remember the title, but it's about how pagan and Jewish communities lived together in the 1st and 2nd centuries of the ancient world. And a book, I do sound like a wanker, don't I? And a really interesting compilation of the Apocrypha and the Christian New Testament called the New Testament, which comes out of a long-term academic project called the Jesus Seminar, which is looking at different ways of understanding that early period of Christianity. And so that's what I'm reading at the moment.
Okay, good. A few books. Now, what's the... and this is just fast facts, by the way. We're going to move into the nitty-gritty in a moment, but I just want to get some fast facts out of the way. What was one of the struggling jobs you had as a writer?
Oh, look,
Or the jobs as a struggling writer, I should say.
Look, my favourite... I mean, I had a lot of jobs... and the last one before the success of The Slap, and I guess The Slap was the book that kind of changed things for me, was as a vet nurse at a veterinary clinic in Northcote, in the northern suburbs here, and that was an absolutely terrific job. And for those of you who know the book, that's why one of the characters is a veterinarian and one of the characters is a vet nurse. Two of the characters, actually. And I will forever be grateful to those people there that I worked with and to that experience. I was working... Sorry, do you want a short answer?
Yeah, it's all about you. It's great. I'm loving it.
I'd actually had been working previous to that at the Australian Centre of the Moving Image. I mean, I love film and the moving image, and it was I was working with absolutely terrific people, but it was a job that was becoming... it was meant to be part-time, and I'd been working like that since my mid-20s, that I was working part-time to make a living, but that my real vocation was to be a writer, and it just couldn't turn out that way. It was becoming a job that couldn't be contained within 3 days a week. It was also going through a massive restructure, which meant there was a lot of fear about people losing their work, a lot of union activity, and I made the decision to leave. And my friend Sol, who's a vet, he said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Look, I'll look for work." And he said, "Well, I can train you up as a vet nurse, and you can stay a few months until you find a job." And I ended up staying there, I think it was 6 or 7 years.
Wow.
And it was, the reason because a lot of you are writers, the thing for me about it was, so coming from ACME, and again, I loved working there, but it was very cerebral. The activity there, and there was something about the physicality of being a vet nurse, the fact that I don't have a science background, I don't have a biology background, and suddenly I was learning new skills, and I was being physical, and I realised that was something I enjoyed as part of a job. I was interacting with the people, the people I worked with who had these incredible talents that they were using and every day, and that it taught me something about the relationship between the animal and the human. That there's, I guess, coming from a Greek background, it's not that there's my mum and dad love cats. I mean, that's where I get it from, but there's a kind of, the animal is not important. The animal doesn't come into the house. And I just realised that there is actually a very a special relationship that occurs between a human and an animal that they love. And I think that was a really constructive 7 years for me, both as a writer, but me as an individual as well.
And what you're saying is nothing goes to waste.
No,
whatever we do.
No,
yeah.
That's absolutely true. I mean, I think that commitment. I know it's hard, and I have talked about this. That we all want to be. We all want to be comfortable. We all want to live a comfortable life. But if you are going to pursue your art, there are certain sacrifices that you need to make. And I think you can make them. I worry that it's becoming increasingly harder. I feel like I was born into a really fortunate generation in that respect. But every single place I've ever worked in has been illuminating, I think.
What's a fear that you have vanquished in your life?
Ooh. That's such a good question. I don't know if I have vanquished this fear. I don't, in the sense that I don't, you know, that word assumes a conquering of it. But I think that for me, I've always been a little bit fearful that the wanting to be liked is. So it was just what came when you. Sometimes means that I have put myself in situations or where I feel a little bit dishonest in the wanting to be liked, and as an artist or a writer, that's also a very troublesome spot to be in. And I think a large part of my early, I think, you know, you live your life, and if you're lucky, you have. You know, you have an incredible family or family and friends and lover who will support you in that, but you deal with your demons on your own as well. You know, I think that Barracuda, the last novel, was very much about that, and that was one demon that I think I've been dealing with for a very long time, and I think in a way my writing was a way of wrestling with it and trying to vanquish it. As I said, I don't think I have. But I've come to a certain peace with it, I think, and that's a different matter. So, sorry, just because it happened today. So I was over at Mum's earlier in the afternoon, and I had found a Greek edition of Barracuda. Oh wow! Right, and at the Northcote Library. And and I don't mean, I mean, just the situation in Greece is so just so ratchet that the publishers have, you know, they've promised to send me the copies, but they've, you know, I don't think they've got enough for mail, really. I'm not being, I mean, I think that's the situation. So I was really excited to, and I gave it to Mum, and I borrowed it, and she'd finished it, and she said, and I said, oh, so what did you think? And she said, it's really good, Christos, but, you know, there's those scenes, you know, why do you have to write about that shit and that and why I'm thinking about it in relationship to your question is I think that's why, because, you know, the editor in that book had said that, you know, Christos, this could be a more accessible novel if some of those scenes were, you know, but that, you know, this was actually not Jane here in Australia who's much, you know, she's been supportive from the word go to me for in terms of what I want to do, but my English publisher, and he meant it in a really, I think, caring way, or you know, but he was, and I said no, I really don't want. I spent a lot of time on those moments and those chapters and those words, and I want them to stay in, and I think it's partly not letting them go is part of that wrestling. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, because you would have been tempted to be liked.
Yes, yeah.
And it's all out there to be had, and yet you stayed firm.
I did. I mean, I think part. I mean, sorry, Bernadette, I'm just thinking about it because it's a good question. And I haven't, you know, sometimes you kind of you realise it's not that I haven't been thinking about these things, but in the articulating of it,
it comes out. Yeah.
It's. I mean, you know, in that sense, you know, the success of the slap, that was what the blindsiding was, that, oh, I'm popular. And I wasn't meant to be popular.
I call it the law of unintended consequences. Fantastic. What did you want to be when you grew up? Was it a writer from an early age?
Yes.
It was.
It was, I don't know what else I could be, really. There was a real period in my adolescence, because I'm obsessed about cinema, where I, you know, I had dreams about being a film director, But I don't think I have the. I just don't think I have a certain talent that's required in film. And I don't think it's about the imagination, I don't think it's about the creative process, and I've loved working on film when I have. But I think there are a series of skills that you need in every art form. And directing is, unless you're doing something that is very, very experimental or kind of, you need to be this. It's the skills of collaboration and management and authority, which I can do when it comes to the novel because I'm working with myself. But it's a harder thing to do in the context of working on a film. So that's I had exercise books where I was writing stories and I was doing the covers, and I had little film scripts, and I used to obsessively, from about 12, just before we left for Box Hill, have scrapbooks of film reviews, and kind of I wanted to be Bob Fosse. I wanted to be those people.
Jazz hands.
Yeah, exactly.
I would just like to take the temperature, literally, of the audience. How are we going with air conditioning? Would we like the air conditioning on? Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
If somebody could maybe help us out with that, that would be great. And just from a sound, I thought I'd never ask this as a facilitator, but can everybody hear us down the back? Awesome. Great. Always like to check in. Great. So let's fast facts out of the way, by the way. I'd love to ask you about success because, for a lot of, on every level, we would perceive you as a successful author, both critically and commercially. So I'm curious, sometimes artists who are successful will say, I'll be successful when I win the Booker Prize. I'll be successful when I have that ocean view. I'll be successful when I can buy whatever I want without looking at the price tag. I'm wondering for you, what's your definition of success?
Look, I think it's, if I'm honest, it's not very different to what would be probably for the definition for most of us in this room, to leave behind a legacy. That is, kind of to write a great book. That's and I've talked about this, so sorry for people who have heard me say this, but this is what came out of, that post-slap period and working on Barracuda was, that there is not for us as writers or artists, and I use that slash because I think, this goes for people who are visual artists, this goes if you're a film director, if you're a poet, it's the same thing. Your notion of what success is you could say, yes, I will buy the beach house, or I will win the Nobel Prize, or the Booker Prize, or the Miles Franklin, or and those are markers, but they're really the markers of the world. They're not really what is, I think genuinely, you want to write a great book, you want to make a great film, you want to write a great poem, you want to paint a great work. And that definition of greatness, we can never really know. It's there's that little voice in your head that goes, partly, am I deserving of this? But partly, is it just fashion, or is it, the reason I talk about it in relationship to Barracuda was that's what attracted me to the sports figure, because it seemed to me it was quantifiable, that the first one across the line is the best, and you just I don't think you know that in the arts in that kind of way. I'm actually struggling a bit with the question, I think, Bernadette, because, to your first question, I'm 51, and then there's an age that I've entered, which I think is the middle age, and there are now different a different set of concerns about what it is that I want out of life. Very different to even say the time when I was writing The Slap was I wasn't, I could say to you then, and it would be absolutely true, I wanted to write a great book, or I want to write a great book, but time seemed much more infinite. It was like, and now I think, well, I don't know how many years I have, and I'm not being morbid, it's just the reality. There's a different kind of relationship I have to the work I'm doing. I want to be a little bit more serious in that sense, to understand that I have this finite time, and you deal with people you love, their death, and that becomes even stronger. So in terms of success, I guess my true answer would be, I'm working it out at the moment, what success will mean. Don't get me wrong, of course you want to, it's the ego that is involved in everything we do. So it's lovely to know people are reading your work. It's lovely to win awards. It's lovely to get acclaim. But you also know that you've worked alongside writers who are great talents, and they've never had any of that. So to buy into an idea that success can only be quantified in those ways is, I think, really dangerous for us.
So if success is a feeling, do you feel a success?
I feel glad that I have found, or have created, or have worked towards a particular space in which I can do the work I love, and I know how lucky I am to be able to say that. It's not. So actually, in that sense, I feel. I hope I'm not being disingenuous, but I do think that, for me, success and fortune slide into each other that way. So I feel fortunate, and then that in an element is something I'm very grateful for. So that's a certain success that I've been able to do that. But success is a chimera. I mean, it's lovely that you're an acclaimed novelist, but you go overseas, and there'll always be a novelist who's written more or had more acclaim, or if you're chasing that, you're just. I mean, that's really destructive. The thing in the long term, and the other thing, because we all have ego, we all have to be honest that we also have envy as part of what we have to deal with. But I think if you're really chasing that kind of material success, then envy it's harder to put in its proper place, and envy needs to be put in its proper place.
Which is a nice segue into the question I have next with William Goldman, the screenwriter of The Princess Bride, and Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid and Misery, an incredible screenwriter. He said, nobody knows anything. Not one person in the entire motion picture field knows for certainty what's going to work. Every time out, it's a guess, and if you're lucky, an educated one. And in terms of the success that you've had, the next book, which of course is Damascus, which we're really looking forward to talking about, do you feel the pressure of the book that you've just done, and that you have to this has to be a success, even though it's an artistic work, you can't possibly know? What's that tension like for you as a writer?
There is that sense of when you're sitting, whether it's your notebook or the computer, that sense when you begin something that it's, especially a novel, that it's, you're right there at the beginning again, right? And that kind of gulp of you have to take and go, am I going to be able to do this? I've said, and it's very true, that Barracuda in a way felt like being a new writer again, right, because it came after the slap. And now that, and maybe again, this is maybe why I feel a certain calm in terms of those kind of wrestling I've been doing with some of my demons. I know I have certain skills. I have certain experience. I have worked now as a writer for over 20 years, and so I don't feel the terror of I won't be able to write. Touch wood. But of course, you know, you don't know if what the work that you are imagining will be the work that will be read, you know. And so I hope I can say that in that way. I'm like everyone who's a writer in this room, that you actually don't know until you've done the work whether this novel is going to work. The difference now is that, as I said, I know when I am feeling petrified that I can go and work on something else. I've learned these skills about how to keep myself working as a writer. So yes, I'm a little bit terrified of whether this book will be any good, but I know that I'm going to complete it. So, and I'm on a third draft now. So the second draft for me, I don't know what it's like for other people, is always really difficult. It's like the first draft is you're kind of putting down the words and you're telling I always begin with a structure with a novel, and then I kind of have from the structure a story and I'm just putting it down, and then the second draft is